They say the cruelest lies are the ones we tell ourselves. That blood makes you family. That your body knows what's best. That one day you'll be enough. I believed these lies for 27 years, until the morning my own family counted $30,000 while I stood barefoot in our kitchen, pretending not to understand what was happening. I watched Delphine count it twice on the kitchen counter. Once to verify the amount, once for pleasure. Each $100 bill made a crisp sound against the marble, like small bones breaking. My father stood at the window, staring at nothing. Breslin sat at the breakfast bar, one hand protective over her swollen belly, sipping coffee with that serene smile pregnant women wear like armor. "You'll write when you get wherever you're going, won't you?" she asked, voice dripping with concern so false it curdled the air. "Let us know you're safe." The Reaper stood by the door, patient as death itself. Tall enough to make our vaulted ceilings feel low. Black coat marked with silver insignia, the Noctis crest, unmistakable. His face was beautiful in the way winter is beautiful, sharp, pale, merciless. I didn't answer Breslin. There were no words left between us. I'd been the broken daughter for as long as I could remember. In a world where vampire houses ruled from shadow and humans organized themselves by usefulness, I was the anomaly. 27 years old with no menstrual cycle, no fertility, no biological value. Doctors had examined me since I was 13, when other girls began their transformations into womanhood and I remained frozen in some prepubescent limbo. My mother Isolde had died when I was 8, cause unknown, they said, though I remembered her cold skin, the strange marks on her wrists, the way father had burned all her belongings. Within a year, Delphine arrived with daughter Breslin in tow, and I became the uncomfortable reminder of a first wife no one wanted to discuss. Everything changed 3 days ago when the collector arrived. Not from House Morgrave, whose protection we paid for with annual tithes of blood and currency. This was different. A summons sealed in black wax bearing the Vampire King's personal seal. Blood debt. Maternal lineage. Payment due immediately. Garrett couldn't pay in currency. He'd already mortgaged everything to Morgrave. He was given a choice. Breslin, fertile and engaged to a Morgrave lieutenant, or Lowen, the daughter worth nothing. It wasn't really a choice. The Reaper crossed the kitchen now, and I met him halfway. His hand closed around my wrist, ice-cold, inhuman, and sudden heat flared beneath my skin. I gasped as the Noctis sigil burned itself into my flesh, silver lines forming a crescent moon devouring a star. I should have screamed. But I'd been numb for years, dead inside where it mattered. "The king has been looking for you for a very long time," he said, voice like silk over steel. He led me toward the door. I looked back once. My father finally met my eyes, lips forming words without sound. "I'm sorry." I turned away. Sorry meant nothing. Sorry didn't change that he'd chosen my sister's comfort over my life. That he'd calculated my worth and found it acceptable to trade. The black car waited, engine purring. As we drove through the night toward the Adirondack Mountains, toward the Noctis citadel I'd only heard about in fearful whispers, the Reaper glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "He doesn't want your womb," he said, almost conversationally. "He wants your blood. And you should be terrified, or flattered. No one's quite sure which." I stared at the passing darkness, watching my old life disappear. "What's the difference?" I asked. His smile was thin and knowing. "Everything, Miss Ashmore. Absolutely everything." The Noctis citadel rose from the mountains like a shard of midnight given form. Black glass and obsidian stone merged with ancient rock, towers twisting skyward in ways that defied physics. Mist clung to everything, and the moment I stepped from the car, I felt it, a humming in my bones, like standing too close to power lines. Magic. Real, tangible, alive. I was led through corridors that seemed carved from shadow itself, then handed to silent attendants who bathed me in water that smelled of wintergreen and starlight. They dressed me in midnight silk that clung like a second skin, braided my dark hair with silver thread, and painted my lips the color of wine. When they finally brought me to the throne room, I expected a monster. The chamber was circular, walls made entirely of black glass that reflected nothing. At its center sat a throne carved from a single piece of obsidian, and on it sat the most beautiful creature I'd ever seen. Velerin Noctis looked no older than 30, but his eyes told a different story, ancient, fathomless, holding 1,000 years of memory. Black hair fell past his shoulders, framing a face too perfect to be real, angular jaw, high cheekbones, lips carved with impossible precision. Scars marked his pale skin like silver threads, decorative rather than disfiguring. He wore simple black, no crown, no ornamentation. He didn't need it. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge. "Eloan," he said, rising with fluid grace. "Come closer." I obeyed, feet silent on cold stone. He descended the throne steps, and when he stood before me, I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. Molten silver shot through with black veins, like lightning frozen in winter skies. "Give me your hand." I extended it, expecting pain. Instead, he turned my wrist gently, studying the Noctis sigil still burning faintly beneath my skin. Then, with a gentleness that terrified me more than violence, he pricked my index finger with a single claw. One drop of blood welled up, dark and perfect. He brought it to his lips, tasted it, and his entire body went still. His eyes flared, not silver anymore, but molten gold, bright enough to hurt. "You are the last," he whispered, voice rough with something like reverence. "The last sanguine oracle." "I don't understand." He released my hand, turning away as if to compose himself. "Sanguine oracles are women whose blood doesn't create children. It creates power. You are living conduits of magic, Eloan, capable of amplifying vampire abilities 1,000-fold, of breaking curses that have stood for millennia, of destroying entire bloodlines with a thought." My head spun. "That's impossible. I'm just broken." He turned back, eyes still burning gold. "No. Your body has been protecting itself. Your barrenness wasn't a defect. It was a seal. Oracle blood is so potent that pregnancy would kill you before conception completed. Your body refused to waste energy on children because it was designed for something infinitely more important." "Then why didn't anyone know? Why didn't the doctors?" "Because oracles were hunted to extinction 200 years ago by the Veilborn, parasitic entities that feed on magical bloodlines. We thought them all dead. Your mother must have hidden you, suppressed your markers somehow." His expression softened with something like grief. "She died protecting that secret." The room tilted. My mother. The strange marks. The way she'd made me promise never to tell anyone when I didn't bleed like other girls. "Your family didn't sell you," Velerin continued, closing the distance between us. "They accidentally rescued you from obscurity. And now, Eloan Ashmore, you belong to me, not as a slave, but as my queen." "Queen?" I breathed. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "If you survive, what comes next?" The Crimson Sanctum lay deep beneath the citadel, accessible only through a spiral staircase that seemed to descend into the mountain's heart. The air grew colder with each step, thick with something ancient and watchful. Torches burned with silver flame, casting no shadows. The chamber itself was circular, walls carved with symbols that hurt to look at directly. At its center lay an altar of black stone, stained with centuries of use. "This is the awakening," Velerin said, his voice echoing strangely. "If you truly carry oracle blood, the ritual will break the seal your mother placed. If you don't—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. "And if I refuse, then you'll live as you are, human, barren, ordinary, safe." His silver eyes held mine. But you'll never know what you could have been. I climbed onto the altar, the stone ice cold against my skin. They dressed me in a gown that opened at the back, exposing my spine from neck to tailbone. Velerin stood over me, and I saw what he held. A ceremonial blade, edge glowing faintly silver, inscribed with the same painful symbols that covered the walls. "This will hurt," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." I gripped the altar's edges. "I've been dead for 27 years. Let's see if there's anything left worth waking." The blade touched my skin at the base of my skull. Then he cut. Not a slice, a raking, dragging the blade down my entire spine in one continuous motion. Pain exploded through me, white hot and absolute. I screamed, body arching, but his hands, held me down with impossible strength. My blood, no, not blood, something else, spilled onto the altar. It glowed. Silver and gold in colors that had no names, pooling beneath me like liquid starlight. Then the visions hit. Snow. Running. My mother's face younger, terrified, holding a baby, holding me. "They'll never find you," she gasped, stumbling through drifts. "I'll make sure you're hidden, even if it costs everything." Her hands glowed as she pressed them to Infamous' spine, and I felt the seal slide into place, locking away what I was. Shift. A woman with my face but wearing medieval dress, standing in a circle of kneeling vampires. Her hands raised, and her essence, that same glowing substance, formed a shield of pure light around them, holding back darkness that screamed. Shift again. The Veilborn. Not creatures but absences, holes in reality with too many eyes and mouths that never stopped opening. They fed on women chained to walls, draining that same glowing essence while the women screamed and screamed and I woke gasping. Silk sheets. Soft mattress. The chamber from before, filled with impossible moonlight. My body felt wrong, not broken, but new, like I'd been disassembled and rebuilt with additional parts. I could feel everything. The thrum of life in the walls. The cold pulse of vampire hearts throughout the citadel. The warm flutter of human servants. Each one a distinct note in a symphony I'd never heard before. I reached back, touched my spine. Raised ridges, still tender. But when I looked in the mirror across the room, I saw it. A scar running the length of my back, glowing faint silver like a lightning strike frozen in flesh. The door opened. Velerin entered, and I felt him now, a supernova of cold power, ancient and vast and barely contained in that beautiful form. He crossed to the bed and did something I never expected. He knelt. "Welcome back, my queen," he said, silver eyes meeting mine with something that looked almost like relief. "You've been asleep for 3 days. I was beginning to worry." I stared at the vampire king kneeling before me, at my glowing scar, at hands that now hummed with power I didn't understand. "What am I?" I whispered. His smile was devastating. "Everything they said you weren't. Everything they feared you could be." "And what comes next?" "Now." He stood, offering his hand. "Now we show the world what they tried to destroy." The grand court of the Noctis Citadel was a cathedral of shadow and silver light. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into darkness overhead. Massive columns carved with ancient faces lined the space. And at the far end, elevated on a dais of black glass, sat 2 thrones, one occupied, one waiting. They dressed me in a gown of black silk and crimson accents, the back cut away entirely to display my glowing scar. Silver chains draped across my shoulders like armor. My hair fell loose, threaded with diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. I looked like a queen. I felt like an imposter. The court assembled before us, representatives from every vampire house in the Eastern Territories. Hundreds of immortal faces, beautiful and terrible, watched as I entered on Velerin's arm. The weight of their collective gaze should have crushed me. Instead, I felt that new power humming beneath my skin, responding to their presence. Velerin led me to the second throne. I sat, spine straight despite the trembling in my hands. He stood before the assembled court, voice carrying without effort. This is Aloan Noctis, last of the sanguine oracles. She is my chosen queen. Any who challenge her challenge me. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the court erupted. Voices overlapping, some in shock, others in outrage. But one voice cut through the chaos like a blade. This is an insult. Lady Corvina Sylvan rose from the front row, tall, elegant, with pale hair swept into an elaborate crown and eyes like chips of ice. She wore white, a deliberate contrast to the darkness around her, and radiated contempt. A human, she continued, voice dripping disdain. You would place a mortal beside the throne that has stood for millennia? The pureblood line demands. The pureblood line demands nothing, Velerin said, voice dropping to something dangerous. I am king. My word is law. Then prove it. Corvina's smile was razor-sharp. If she is truly oracle-born, let her undergo the triad of dominion. Let her prove before this court that she deserves to stand where no human has ever stood. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled vampires. Velerin turned to me, one eyebrow raised in silent question. I could refuse. Return to my chamber, live quietly as his protected secret. But I'd spent 27 years being told what I couldn't do. I accept, I said, voice steady. Velerin's lips curved slightly. The triad begins tomorrow. 3 trials, witnessed by the full court. He paused, silver eyes gleaming with something that looked like satisfaction. And to ensure proper testimony, I've invited special witnesses. The side doors opened. My breath caught. Garrett, Delphine, and Breslin Ashmore were escorted in by guards, their human fragility painfully obvious among the immortal predators. They wore their finest clothes, probably the same ones they bought with my selling price, but looked small, insignificant, mortal in ways I'd never noticed before. Breslin's eyes found me on the throne, and her smug smile faltered. Delphine went white as bone. Garrett simply stared, tears already streaming down his weathered face. They were seated in the front row, directly in my line of sight. The Ashmore family, Velerin announced, who so graciously delivered our oracle to us, will witness her ascension. Or her failure. The threat in those words was unmistakable. If I failed, they would pay for delivering a false oracle. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The court session continued with procedural matters I barely heard. My attention kept returning to my family, watching Breslin's hand protectively cover her pregnant belly, seeing Delphine's practiced composure cracking, observing my father's shoulders shake with silent sobs. When the session finally concluded, I descended from the throne. The crowd parted automatically. I stopped directly in front of Garrett. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. Aloan, You are right to sell me, I said clearly, loud enough for nearby vampires to hear. I was never yours to keep. I was never meant for that small life you offered. I smiled, and it wasn't kind. Thank you for setting me free. I walked away, leaving him breaking apart in a room full of monsters, finally understanding exactly what he'd traded away for $30,000 and his own comfort. The first trial began at dawn, or what passed for dawn in the windowless Grand Court, marked only by the shifting of silver flames in the massive braziers. The trial of will. A vampire was brought forward, ancient and powerful, with eyes that swirled like oil on water. Master Thaddeus, they called him, a psychic vampire who could reduce minds to ash with a thought. You will resist, Velerin explained quietly as I stood in the circle marked on the floor. If you break, the trial ends. You fail. Thaddeus smiled, revealing teeth too sharp, too numerous. Shall we begin, little human? The assault hit like a battering ram against my skull. Kneel, his voice commanded, bypassing my ears entirely, drilling straight into my brain. Kneel before your betters. You are nothing. You have always been nothing. My knees started to buckle. The court watched, some leaning forward eagerly. I saw Breslin in the front row, that familiar smugness returning to her face. Then I felt it, the power coiled in my spine, awakened and waiting. Oracle blood didn't just amplify magic. It was magic. I grabbed the psychic thread Thaddeus had jammed into my mind and pulled. The compulsion reversed, flowing backward like a river changing course. Thaddeus's eyes went wide. His confident smile crumbled. And then, impossibly, his legs folded beneath him. He knelt. Before me. Before the worthless human girl. The court exploded with noise. I released him, breathing hard, and met Velarin's gaze. He nodded once, approval clear. Trial 1, passed. The second trial was crueler. They locked me in a chamber with a dying human, a servant girl, maybe 19, bleeding from a vampire feeding gone wrong. On the table beside her sat a vial of my own blood, drawn that morning. Oracle blood can heal anything, Velarin's voice echoed through a speaker. But using it will drain you completely. The third trial begins in 1 hour, whether you've recovered or not. Choose. I looked at the girl's pale face, at the blood pooling beneath her, at the vial that could save her but leave me helpless for the final test. My family had taught me that survival meant choosing yourself first. That sacrifice was for fools. I uncorked the vial and pressed it to her lips. The effect was immediate. Color returned to her cheeks, wounds closing with visible speed. She gasped, alive, whole. And I collapsed, the room spinning, power completely drained. But something miraculous happened. As I lay there, barely conscious, I felt it regenerating. Not slowly, but in waves, oracle blood feeding on the act of selfless giving, growing stronger through sacrifice rather than weaker. I stood on shaking legs as the door opened. The girl threw her arms around me, weeping thanks. Trial 2, passed. The third trial was the simplest and the hardest. I stood before the entire court, before my family, before Corvina's contemptuous glare, and Velarin asked, "Speak your deepest shame. The truth you hide even from yourself." The chamber fell silent. I could lie. Could craft something political, strategic. Instead, I looked at my father and said the words that tore my throat raw. I believed I was worthless. I believed my family was right about me. My voice cracked. And part of me, even now, even after everything, still wants their love. Still wants my father to say he was wrong. Still wants to matter to people who sold me like livestock. Tears I'd refused to shed for 3 days finally fell. That's my shame. That after all they did, some broken part of me still wants them to want me back. The silence was absolute. Even Corvina had no retort. My father sobbed openly. Breslin looked away. Velarin descended from his throne, carrying a crown of black metal and silver starlight. He placed it on my head with infinite gentleness. Trial 3, passed. His voice carried to every corner. I present Queen Aloan Noctis. First of her renewed line. Last of the oracles. And the bravest soul I've met in 1,000 years. The court knelt as one. Even Corvina. Even my family. I was queen. The first week of queenship was a performance. I sat beside Velarin during court sessions, learned the intricate politics of vampire houses, memoized names and allegiances and ancient grudges. I wore crowns and silk and played the part they needed me to play. But at night, I explored. The citadel held secrets in its bones, passages that led nowhere, rooms sealed for centuries, libraries filled with texts in dead languages. I was drawn to Velarin's private study, A tower chamber he'd told me was off limits. Old paperwork, he'd said dismissively. Treaties and ledgers. Boring beyond measure. He'd lied. I found the entrance behind a bookshelf in our shared quarters, waited until he was occupied with House Morgrave's delegation, and slipped inside. The study was circular, walls lined with documents preserved in glass. But it was the center of the room that stopped my heart, a pedestal holding a single book bound in something that looked disturbingly like human skin, locked with chains that radiated cold. I shouldn't have touched it. But Oracle blood had advantages. The chains recognized power and loosened at my touch. The book fell open to a page marked with dried blood. The Covenant of Endless Night. Read the title in script that hurt my eyes. Below it, terms written in 3 languages, signed in blood by the first vampire king, and something that left a stain shaped like screaming mouths. The Veilborn. I read with growing horror. In exchange for immortality, for freedom from death's grip, the vampire lineage had agreed to cultivate Oracle bloodlines. To hide them among human populations. To let them breed in ignorance. And when their power matured, to harvest them. Deliver them to the Veilborn to be drained, consumed, destroyed. Every Oracle extinction hadn't been coincidence. It had been contract fulfillment. Worse, the pact transferred through the royal line. Each new king inherited the binding until the debt was paid in full. 300 years ago, Velarin's name had been added to the covenant in his own blood. The final clause made my stomach turn. The pact may only be broken by the death of the current vampire sovereign, freely given in place of the contracted oracle. You weren't supposed to find that. I spun. Velarin stood in the doorway, face carefully blank, but his silver eyes held devastation. How long? My voice shook with fury. How long were you planning to hand me over to those things? Never. He entered slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. I've spent 3 centuries searching for a way to break the covenant without, he stopped. Without dying. I finished, pieces clicking into horrible place. That's why you've been searching for oracles. Not to crown one. To find one powerful enough that when you sacrificed yourself to break the pact, she might survive what came after. His silence was confirmation. You are going to die for me. It wasn't a question. A woman you just met. You are going to. My voice cracked. I was going to save you, he said quietly, closing the distance between us. The Veilborn have been hunting you since you were born, Eloan. They killed your mother when she hid you. They've been patient, waiting for you to mature, grow into your full power. The moment they realize you've awakened, his jaw clenched. They'll come. And the covenant binds me to deliver you. Unless you're dead first. My hands trembled with rage and something deeper, grief for a sacrifice he'd been planning before we'd even met. You were going to trade your life for mine, then hope I was strong enough to fight them alone. You are strong enough. His hand cupped my face with devastating gentleness. Stronger than any oracle before you. You could survive them, rebuild the line, free your sisters still trapped in. No. I gripped his wrist. I won't let you disappear. There has to be another way. There isn't. I've searched. Then we search harder. I met his ancient silver eyes with all the fury of someone who'd just discovered she had something worth fighting for. You said the pact ends if the Veilborn's contract is fulfilled or broken. What if we don't break it? What if we destroy the ones who made it? His eyes widened slightly. The Veilborn queen. If she dies. The contract dies with her. I smiled, sharp and dangerous. So we don't run. We hunt. The ritual required my blood, Velarin's power, and a rogue vampire who owed the king a life debt. Cassian Thorne was lean and dangerous, with scars that told stories of survival against impossible odds. He'd been tracking Veilborn for decades, losing everyone he loved to their harvests. When Velerin explained our plan, Cassian's scarred face split into a feral grin. About damn time someone went on the offensive. The portal required a precise mixture, oracle blood spilled willingly, vampire essence anchoring the passage, and a focal point, an object touched by the Veilborn. We used my mother's locket, the one thing father hadn't burned, still carrying the psychic residue of her death. I cut my palm, let blood pool in the silver basin. Velerin added his power, and reality tore. The Veilborn nexus was wrong in ways that defied description. Architecture that couldn't exist, gravity pulling in multiple directions, walls that breathed. The air tasted like screams aged for centuries. But nothing prepared me for the harvest chambers. Row after row of crystalline pods stretched into infinity, each containing a woman suspended in stasis. Numbers etched on every pod, not names, never names. Just classifications. Inventory. I moved through them in horror. Young women, old women, girls barely into puberty. All sharing one thing. The faint silver glow along their spines. All oracles. All stolen, labeled barren or defective by a world that couldn't recognize what they truly were. 847. Cassian whispered, voice raw. Mother of Night. 847. Then I saw her. Pod 637. The woman inside had my face, my dark hair now streaked with silver. Older, thinner, but unmistakable. Isolde. I breathed, pressing hands to the crystal. Mother. Her eyes were closed, chest barely rising. But alive. After 19 years, somehow still alive. How touching. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The temperature dropped to Arctic cold. And she appeared, not walking, but manifesting. The Veilborn Queen was a wound in reality, a towering absence that hurt to perceive. Shadow-given predatory intelligence. 1,000 mouths opening and closing across her form, each whispering different horrors. The last oracle, come to me willingly. Her voices overlapped, creating harmonies of madness. How delicious. I faced her, feeling Velerin and Cassian flank me protectively. I'm not here to be harvested. No. A mouth near what might have been her head curved upward. Then why come to my domain, little light? Surely not to fight. You're powerful, yes, but newly awakened. Untrained. Foolish. She drifted closer, and I felt the pull. She fed on oracle essence like a black hole feeds on light. I offer you mercy, she continued. Take your mother. I'll release her, let you both leave. Live your queenship. Bear no children. Rule beside your vampire king. Die peacefully of old age. I'll never touch you. Never hunt you. This I vow. Temptation lanced through me. My mother, alive, returned. Everything I'd grieved for. And them? I gestured to the endless rows. The 847 women you've drained for centuries. Fuel. Food. Necessary sacrifices. The Veilborn Queen's indifference was absolute. What are they to you? You never knew them. I looked at Velerin. His silver eyes held pain. He knew what this cost, asking me to choose between my mother and strangers. But I'd already chosen. I'm not here to save one, I said, power beginning to build along my scar. I'm here to end you. I released everything, every ounce of oracle power, channeling it not as a shield but as a weapon. Silver light exploded from my spine, branching like lightning to every pod simultaneously. The Veilborn Queen shrieked, mouths opening impossibly wide. You'll die, she screamed. The feedback will burn you to ash. She was right. I felt myself disintegrating, power consuming me from within. Then Velerin's arms wrapped around me from behind, his ancient essence pouring into me, anchoring me, giving me strength that wasn't my own. Together, he whispered against my ear. The pods shattered as one. The Veilborn Queen's anchor to our realm severed with a sound like the universe screaming. She dissolved, not dying but banished, ripped back into whatever void had spawned her. I collapsed into Velarin's arms as around us, 847 women gasped their first free breaths in centuries, including my mother, who opened her eyes and whispered my name. We returned through the portal with an army the world had never seen, 847 oracles, weak from captivity but blazing with awakened power. My mother leaned on me, still frail but growing stronger with each hour of freedom. The Citadel's halls filled with silver light as they entered, a constellation of living magic. The vampire court assembled an emergency session, shock written across immortal faces as they beheld what had been thought extinct, now returned en masse. I stood before them, no longer the uncertain girl sold for $30,000. The crown sat heavy on my head, and I wore it like I was born to it. The old world is dead, I declared, voice carrying to every corner of the grand court. I propose the Oracle Accords, effective immediately. I unfurled the document I'd drafted during our journey back, Velarin having reviewed and approved each word. First, humans are sovereign. No longer bred for service, sold as payment, or compelled as cattle. Second, oracles are protected under international law, with full rights and autonomy. Third, vampire houses must earn human cooperation through fair exchange, not force. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some nodded, progressive houses who'd long questioned the old ways. Others looked disturbed. Lady Corvina rose like a pale spectre, contempt radiating from every line of her elegant frame. Impossible. You would overturn millennia of tradition for sentiment? Humans exist to serve their betters. This is the natural order. The natural order, I replied coldly, was built on a lie. On stealing oracle power and calling it progress. That ends now. You cannot enforce this. Corvina's voice dropped to something dangerous. You may have parlor tricks and rescued cattle, but you lack the strength to. She has me, Velarin said quietly, standing from his throne. She has the crown. And she has saved 847 souls your natural order condemned to slow death. I suggest you choose your next words carefully, Corvina. The matriarch's face went hard. Then I choose these. The pureblood supremacy rejects these accords. We reject this, human, as queen. She addressed the court. Those who remember what we are, what we were before this weakness, join me. We will restore the true order. 30 vampires stood. Ancient ones, powerful houses. Enough to make a war devastating. So be it, Velarin said. You have until dawn to leave the citadel. After that, you are enemies of the crown. As Corvina swept from the hall with her followers, taking perhaps a fifth of the court's strength, I felt the weight of what we'd just ignited. War. Real, bloody, terrible war. Your Majesty. I turned to find guards escorting 3 familiar figures forward. My family, summoned at my request. Garrett looked older, diminished. Delphine maintained her composure through sheer will. Breslin cradled her pregnant belly protectively, fear naked in her eyes. You wish to see us? My father asked, voice breaking. I'm offering you protection, I said flatly. The coming war will be brutal. You'll be safe here, in the citadel, under my guard. Relief flooded their faces. But understand this. I stepped closer, letting them see the oracle light in my eyes. I'm not doing this because I forgive you. I'm doing this because I'm better than you taught me to be. I turned to Breslin, who'd started to smile with her old smugness. You don't get to be proud of me now, I said, each word deliberate. You don't get to tell people your sister is queen, claim reflected glory, rewrite history to make yourselves the supportive family. You get safety. You get to live. And you get to spend every day knowing you sold me for less than a used car. Breslin's face crumpled. Take them to the south wing, I told the guards. Comfortable quarters. Protected. Imprisoned until the war ends and I decide what to do with them. As they were led away, my mother, my real mother, freed from 19 years of stasis, took my hand. You've become magnificent, Isolde whispered. I squeezed her fingers, watching my father disappear down the corridor, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The girl they'd sold was gone. The queen remained. And she had a war to win. They came at midnight, when darkness should have been their advantage. The pureblood supremacy forces numbered in the thousands. Ancient vampires who remembered when humans were nothing but food, who'd built empires on compulsion and fear. They brought fire and old magic, siege weapons crafted centuries ago for wars I'd only read about. But we were ready. The oracles lined the citadel walls, 847 points of silver light forming a constellation of living power. Human rebels, those who'd suffered under the old system, stood armed with weapons blessed by oracle blood. Loyalist vampire houses formed the vanguard, led by Velerin himself, midnight dark and terrifying in full battle regalia. And I stood at the center, crown blazing, scar glowing like lightning frozen along my spine. The battle was chaos. Vampire's speed met oracle shields. Ancient magic shattered against newer, purer power. I moved through the fighting, not as a helpless prize but as a weapon myself, my blood forming barriers, healing the wounded, amplifying our forces while dampening theirs. Then I felt her, a cold spike of malevolent attention cutting through the battlefield noise. Lady Corvina Sylvan appeared on the main rampart, having cut through our defenses with surgical precision. Her white gown was splattered with blood, not hers. She moved with predatory grace, ancient and powerful and utterly convinced of her superiority. You, she hissed, fangs extended. This ends with you. I faced her, unarmed except for the power humming in my veins. Around us, fighting slowed as combatants recognized the significance of this confrontation. A human playing dress-up, Corvina sneered, circling me. Wearing a crown that doesn't belong to you. You're a mistake, an aberration. When I drain you, this farce ends and the natural order. I'm not playing anything, I interrupted, voice calm. Power gathered along my scar, visible now, branching across my skin like silver lightning. I'm the thing your kind spent centuries trying to kill, and I'm still here. She lunged, vampire speed making her nearly invisible. But oracle blood doesn't just amplify, it knows. I sidestepped, caught her wrist, and channeled everything I'd learned in the harvest chambers directly into her ancient flesh. Corvina screamed, not in pain, but in shock, as she felt her vampirism unraveling. Her fangs retracted, her pale skin flushed with sudden warmth. Her immortal strength drained away like water through grasping fingers. I held her as she collapsed, no longer a centuries-old predator but simply a woman. Mortal, fragile, human. Live as what you despised, I said quietly, releasing her. Learn what it means to be powerless. To age. To fear. And maybe, if you survive long enough, you'll understand why the old world needed to die. She stared at her trembling, human hands, horror and disbelief warring in her eyes. The message was clear. I hadn't killed her. I'd done something worse. I'd made her one of us. The pureblood forces broke. Those who witnessed their leader's transformation either surrendered or fled. By dawn, the citadel still stood, and the oracle accords were signed in the grand court by every remaining vampire house. A new world, written in silver and starlight. 3 months later, I stood on the highest balcony of the citadel, watching the celebration below. Freed oracles danced with humans and progressive vampires. Music rose into the night, not the formal court music of before, but something wild and joyful. My mother was down there somewhere, teaching younger oracles to control their power. Cassian had become head of oracle security. Even my family remained, confined but safe, forced to witness daily the worth of what they'd sold. Velerin emerged from the shadows behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. Together, we watched our new world taking its first steps. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. I felt my oracle scar pulse with power, felt the weight of the crown, felt the freedom of finally knowing my worth. "Only that it took being sold to realize I was never for sale," I said, leaning back into his cold embrace. Below, someone started a chant. "Eloan the Unbroken. Eloan the Unbroken." The name spread like wildfire through the crowd. Velerin smiled against my neck. "It suits you." I turned in his arms, kissed him beneath stars that had witnessed empires rise and fall, and knew with absolute certainty. I was Eloan the Unbroken, last of the sanguine oracles, first of the new queens, and I had rewritten the world.